When Russia wanted the US to sit up and take notice last April, it sent tanks towards the Ukrainian border. The show of force worked. President Joe Biden called Russia's Vladimir Putin, and in June the two men met in Geneva. But whatever they agreed about Ukraine at their summit, something has since gone awry. In recent weeks, Russian tanks have been moving west towards Ukraine once again, prompting fresh, even starker warnings from US intelligence circles that a cross-border offensive could be on the cards. Moscow insists that's anti-Russian hysteria, and most analysts agree there's no rationale for Russia openly entering and massively escalating the conflict in Ukraine, where it backs separatist forces but always denies a direct role. Instead, they see the Kremlin sending a message that it's ready to defend its red lines on Ukraine, above all, that it must not join NATO. I think for Putin it's really important. He thinks the West has begun giving Ukraine's elite hope about joining NATO, political analyst Tatyana Stanovaya at R-Politik told the media. The training, the weapons and so on are like a red rag to a bull for Putin, and he thinks, if he doesn't act today, then tomorrow there will be NATO bases in Ukraine. He needs to put a stop to that. Ukraine's desire to join the security bloc is nothing new, nor is Russia's insistence on vetoing that ambition in what it sees as its own backyard. But Moscow has been rattled recently by the Ukrainian military using Turkish drones against Russian-backed forces in eastern Ukraine. The flight near Crimea of two nuclear-capable US bombers was an extra irritant. There's also concern that the so-called Minsk agreements, a framework for ending Ukraine's 7-year-old conflict that's too contentious to actually implement, could be jettisoned for something more favorable to Kyiv. In April, Russia found that demonstrative military deployment worked well, so it's repeating the trick. Our recent warnings have indeed been heard, and the effect is noticeable. Tensions have risen, President Putin told Russian diplomats last week. He argued that tension needed sustaining to force the West to reckon with Russia, not ignore it. If the military movements close to Ukraine are explicit, then this is not about direct military action, it's about a signal Putin wants to send, Andrei Korchinov, head of the Ryak think tank in Moscow, told the media. The signal to Ukraine is not to try anything rash, he believes, like seizing back control of the Donbas. For the West, Mr. Korchinov says Russia's message is to stop its infiltration of Ukraine with NATO infrastructure, including new kinds of weapons. That's definitely a matter of concern for Moscow, he argues. This week, Russia's external intelligence agency, the SVR, evoked the 2008 Georgia war in a statement on Ukraine. It recalled the high price paid by then-Georgian President Mikhail Saakashvili, who sparked all-out conflict with Russia by attempting to regain control of the separatist region of South Ossetia, which is backed by Moscow. The Georgian scenario is on the table and could be used in Ukraine, Tatyana Stanovaya argues. That doesn't mean Russia is preparing it, that there's no way back. I think it's just an option for now, not a decision, she says. Ukraine itself at first dismissed US talk of an unusual troop buildup, though it has since joined the chorus of concern. According to its head of military intelligence, Kirill Budanov, around 90,000 Russian troops are now deployed in the vicinity of Ukraine, fewer than during similar tensions last spring. He believes they could launch an attack from several directions early next year. On Friday, Ukraine's president made clear his country had no plans for an incursion into the Donbas. Russia would definitely like to send the signal that if forced to fight, it will fight, Mr. Korchinov reasons. But I don't see what can be accomplished by a direct military offensive against Ukraine. No matter how it goes, the collateral damage will be much more significant than any possible gain. So it's possible Mr. Putin is hedging his bets. My suspicion is that this is contingency planning, was security expert Mark Galeotti's conclusion in his podcast In Moscow's Shadow. He suggests the Kremlin is creating all sorts of opportunities and no firm decision has been taken. But he too doubts that Moscow wants open conflict, bringing more sanctions and a total rupture in relations with the West. A vicious war in Ukraine, when Russia